A shy girl undergoes breast augmentation surgery, shockingly. Her doctor is a young millionaire and… The rain tapped gently against the windows of the small cafe in downtown Seattle. But inside, the tension was anything but soft. "Be honest, Claire," Tyler's voice sliced through the murmur of coffee machines and distant jazz. "Do you really think I stayed with you because you're cute?" Claire Weston, 26, sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea she had barely touched. Her blonde hair framed a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. "You're sweet," he continued, waving a hand in the air like he was describing a pet. "You're obedient. You're safe. But Claire, you're boring. You're like cardboard. And your chest," he chuckled without warmth, tapping the table with his knuckles. "Flatter than this table." The words echoed in her ears long after they were said. She stared at him, her face pale, her lips slightly parted as if they might form a protest, but nothing came. Her throat tightened. Her knuckles whitened around the mug. You're serious?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, strained and cracking under the weight of disbelief. Tyler stood up, unhurried. "I'm done pretending," he said, slipping his coat on as if he had just wrapped up a business transaction. "I need someone who makes me feel alive. Someone who turns heads when she walks in. You're not that girl, Claire. You never were." He dropped a few bills on the table, enough to cover his espresso but not the devastation he left behind. Without another glance, he strode to the door, pushed it open, and just beyond the glass, a woman in tight jeans and crimson lipstick stepped into his arms, as if they had practiced it. The cafe door chimed softly behind them. Claire didn't move. Around her, life went on, spoons clinked, coffee steamed, someone laughed too loudly, but she was somewhere else entirely. Her tea had long gone cold, like the part of her heart that used to hold Tyler's name. A young waitress passed their table and gave Claire a fleeting glance, one that said, "I saw, but also I won't ask." Then she disappeared into the hum of the cafe. Outside, the drizzle became a downpour. That night, Claire stood in the fluorescent light of her cramped bathroom. The mirror was small and scratched, framed by cracked tiles. She stared at her reflection like she was meeting it for the first time, and not in a good way. Her blonde hair fell limp around her face. Her blue eyes looked dulled, like the color had drained out of them. She reached up and slowly unbuttoned her blouse, each movement mechanical, distant. Her collarbones were sharp, her chest flat beneath a faded camisole. Her fingers trembled as they brushed over her skin, unfamiliar and unforgiving. She couldn't stop hearing his voice. "Cardboard. Flat. Not enough." She whispered to the girl in the mirror, "Am I really that? Invisible?" No answer came. She slid down the wall, arms wrapped around her knees. The cold floor seeped into her skin, but the numbness inside her was worse. Her phone buzzed from the sink counter. A notification. Instagram. Tyler had posted a story. Her heart clenched as she opened it. There he was, at a bar. That same red lipstick woman beside him, laughing, radiant. Her body full, curved, her head on his shoulder. The caption read, "Finally with someone who gets me." Claire's stomach dropped. She pressed her forehead to her knees, willing herself not to cry. But the tears came anyway, hot, bitter, unstoppable. With shaking hands, she picked up her phone again, opened Google. She didn't think, she just typed. Discrete breast augmentation, Seattle. A clinic appeared, private, 5 stars, glowing testimonials. She stared at the screen, her chest heaving, her heart breaking in silence. She bookmarked the page. Still on the floor, Claire pressed a hand to her chest as if trying to feel something, anything, beneath the skin. A heartbeat. A reason to believe she was still enough. But all she felt was emptiness. Under the buzz of the flickering bathroom light, Claire whispered to the quiet, "If I change, maybe I'll finally be worth staying for." And the mirror didn't argue. It simply reflected her pain, silent and merciless. The lobby of the private clinic was unlike any Claire had ever seen. No sterile white walls, no sharp chemical scent. Instead, there were warm earth tones, soft jazz playing in the background, and a faint hint of lavender in the air. It felt more like a high-end spa than a surgical center. Still, her heart pounded. She had checked in at the front desk under the name Anna Lee. The receptionist hadn't blinked. Discretion, after all, was their promise. Claire sat in the waiting area, her palms slick against her jeans. She wore a simple sweater, her blonde hair pulled into a low ponytail. Her makeup was minimal, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. In her purse, she clutched a folded piece of paper, questions she had planned to ask, just in case she forgot how to speak. A door opened. A nurse called her name, her borrowed name, and led her down a quiet corridor. Claire followed, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. When they reached the consultation room, the nurse gestured for her to wait. Moments later, the door opened again, and in walked Julian Reeves. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, dressed in dark slacks and a soft gray sweater under his white coat. No tie. His sleeves pushed up slightly, revealing forearms that looked strong, capable. But it was his eyes that caught her breath, calm, steady, not invasive, just present. He offered her a small, almost amused smile, as if he could sense the storm behind her silence. "Anna, right?" he said gently, extending his hand. She nodded, hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, steadying. He sat across from her, opened her file. "So," he said, tone careful but not cold, "what brings you here today?" Claire stared at her hands. The room suddenly felt much too quiet. Her throat tightened. Words sat behind her lips like stones. Julian waited. Then he closed the file. "Let me guess," he said, voice softer. "You are not here because you hate your body. You're here because someone else convinced you it is not enough." Her head jerked up. For a second, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Julian leaned back. "It happens more than you think. Someone we trust says something that slices deeper than a scalpel ever could. And we come here, thinking maybe we can stitch that wound with a procedure." Claire's eyes welled, but she blinked quickly, refusing to let them fall. He didn't push, just watched her with that same, quiet patience. Julian tapped her file lightly. "I will help you," he said clearly. "If and only if you are doing this for yourself. Not to win back someone who did not have the decency to love you right." The air left Claire's lungs in a rush. She stood suddenly, chairs scraping behind her. I should go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This was a mistake. She turned toward the door. Julian stood too, but he didn't block her way. Instead, he reached out gently and placed a hand on her shoulder, not to stop her, but to let her know he was still there. "You can stay," he said softly. "Not as a patient, just as someone who deserves kindness, respect, dignity." Claire froze. No one had said those words to her before, not in a way that felt real. She didn't speak, just sat back down slowly, hands still trembling. Julian offered a glass of water. She took it. They didn't talk much after that. He asked a few medical questions, kept the rest simple. His eyes never strayed, never judged. When the consultation ended, he gave her a card with his number, not the clinic's. A note scribbled beneath, for questions, big or small. As Claire stepped back out into the Seattle drizzle, she looked up at the sky for the first time in days. It was still gray, but something inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time, stirred. Hope. The white sheets felt too clean, too still. Claire lay there, the hum of machines around her, the muted drip of IV fluid beside her bed. The surgery was over. Successful, according to the nurse's brief words. Minimal complications. Smooth recovery ahead. But the room was silent. No phone calls, no flowers, no waiting friends or family. Just the slow ticking of the clock and the ache in her chest, not from the incisions but from the emptiness. Claire turned her head slightly and stared at the window. The Seattle sky was its usual shade of overcast gray. Raindrops tapped against the glass like a metronome, matching the rhythm of her thoughts, steady, relentless, cold. Sometime during the afternoon, her eyelids grew heavy. She drifted off, her arms curled around a small, worn leather notebook tucked under the blanket with her. It was the only thing she'd brought, aside from her clothes, her lifeline. Hours later, the door opened softly. Julian stepped in, clipboard in hand. His footsteps were light but deliberate. He didn't expect her to be awake. When he saw her, slouched to one side, sleeping with one hand still loosely gripping the edge of the blanket, his gaze softened. He checked the monitors quietly, made a few notes. Then, as he turned to leave, he noticed the notebook slipping from her grasp. Gently, he reached to place it on the nightstand. But as it tilted open, something inside caught his eye. A sketch. Just a single drawing, done in pencil. The lines were light but haunting. A girl sat alone in the corner of a page, hunched and small, her knees pulled to her chest. But behind her, faint, uncertain, were wings. Not fully formed, not yet spread, just beginning to grow. Julian froze. He stared at the image for a long moment, his breath catching unexpectedly. It was not the skill of the drawing that struck him, it was the soul inside it. The quiet cry for emergence. The ache of someone who had been folded so long she had forgotten she was capable of flying. He closed the book carefully, placing it where it would not fall again. Then he stood there, looking down at Claire, her brows slightly furrowed even in sleep, her breathing slow and shallow. "She's trying," he whispered. "She's trying to fly." That night, long after his shift ended, Julian didn't go home. Instead, he remained in his private office upstairs. A set of watercolors lay unopened on the shelf, a gift from a patient who once said she hoped he'd one day use them. Tonight he did. He did. On thick paper, he painted. With a steadiness not unlike surgery, he let color breathe life into the sketch he had seen. The same girl, now with wings blooming in vibrant hues of blue and violet, standing with her back to the light, no longer caged in a corner, but stepping forward. By dawn, it was done. The painting sat quietly inside a thin wooden frame. Beneath it, in neat handwriting, he wrote a single sentence: "You have wings, even if you cannot see them yet." At 6 a.m., Julian returned to Claire's room. She was still asleep, her face turned toward the window where morning fog pressed gently against the pane. He placed the painting on her bedside table. When Claire woke an hour later, the first thing she saw was not the white ceiling or the IV drip. It was the painting. She blinked, sitting up slowly. Her hands reached out before her thoughts could catch up. She stared at it. Her lips parted. The girl, the wings, the message. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She looked around the room, but Julian was gone. For the first time since the day she walked into the clinic, Claire smiled, not because someone gave her something, not because she looked different, but because someone had seen her, really seen her. Not the outside, not the surface. Her. The quiet, aching, broken part that was trying to become whole. She clutched the painting to her chest and closed her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Claire was no longer the girl who cried in the bathroom mirror. She was not entirely changed, no, but something had shifted. A quiet awakening had begun inside her, like spring sunlight melting the last frost. It started with little things. She signed up for a yoga class. She began sketching again. She walked through the park without headphones, letting herself hear the world for once. And slowly, she stopped avoiding mirrors. Instead of glaring at her reflection, she looked longer. She touched her collarbone. She adjusted her posture. Some mornings she even smiled. That was the Claire Julian saw the day he invited her into his photography studio. "I'm working on something called Inner Light," he had said gently over coffee. "Portraits of people learning to see themselves differently. I would like you to be part of it." Claire hesitated. Her old instincts screamed to shrink away, but her new self, still fragile but braver, nodded. The studio was minimalist, warm-toned wood floors, soft white walls. Gentle music played in the background. Still, when Claire stepped in, her hands trembled slightly. Each spotlight felt like a ghost of every judgmental glance she'd ever endured. Every footstep forward was a confrontation with the voice in her head that had whispered, "You are never enough." Julian stood a few feet away, adjusting the lights. He didn't rush her, didn't instruct. He simply said, "Just breathe. And be yourself." Claire exhaled slowly, eyes cast downward. The camera clicked once. She flinched. Julian didn't speak to her directly at first. Instead, he spoke to the light, to the space, to the invisible stories that lived between silence and stillness. "I remember the first day she walked into my office," he said softly, more to the air than to anyone. Eyes lowered, voice almost a whisper. But in her hand, there was this sketchbook. And in it, I saw someone who still believed in beauty, even when the world had told her she wasn't part of it. Claire blinked. He continued, "I used to think medicine was the only way to heal, but now I know healing has more than one language. Sometimes it's graphite on paper. Sometimes it's showing up to your own life, even when it hurts." Her eyes met his. Slowly, a single tear traced down her cheek, not from pain but recognition. The next photos captured something different. Her shoulders relaxed, her lips parted. There was no forced smile, but there was presence. Realness. She wasn't hiding anymore. Later, Julian handed her the first printed photo. Claire held it in both hands, her breath catching. "This is me," she whispered, tears surfacing again. "Yes," Julian said, his voice low and warm, "the way I have always seen you, strong, whole, beautiful in a way too many people are too afraid to name." Claire looked up at him. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she took a step forward. And another. Close now. Close enough that her fingertips brushed his. Julian didn't move. He didn't need to. In that moment, he wasn't her doctor. He wasn't even her photographer. He was simply a man who had seen her, layer by layer, not as something to be fixed, but as someone becoming. And she was done hiding. The world spun, and then it vanished. Claire did not remember the fall, only that the supermarket lights had seemed too bright, her legs too heavy, and her breath too shallow. She had been reaching for the cheaper cereal on the top shelf, ignoring the pounding in her head and the shaking in her hands. Then everything had gone black. When she came to, she was no longer under fluorescent lights or surrounded by aisles of cardboard boxes. She was on her couch, wrapped in the thick blue knit blanket her mother had sent her years ago. The air smelled of chicken soup, rich and comforting, and a hint of lemon, like someone had opened a bottle of essential oil nearby. The room was quiet, washed in the golden glow of a single lamp. The rain tapped softly against the window. It felt like she had stepped out of the chaos of her life and into a still photograph. Then she saw him. Julian was asleep in the armchair across from her, his frame curved awkwardly to one side, a paperback balanced loosely in his hand. His chest rose and fell gently. His other hand rested on the armrest, open, relaxed. Vulnerable. Claire blinked, slowly shifting upright. The blanket slipped off her shoulder, revealing the familiar worn-out t-shirt she had worn earlier that day, now damp with sweat. She glanced at the book in Julian's lap. The Courage to Love Yourself. Her breath caught. Taut. Julian stirred as if he had felt the shift in the room. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then clear and sharp the moment they locked onto hers. "You're awake," he said softly, the tension in his shoulders falling away. "Thank God." Claire tried to sit up straighter, but her body ached. "What happened?" "You fainted," Julian replied, moving to sit at the edge of the couch. "I happened to be there. The manager was calling an ambulance, but I panicked. I brought you here instead. I hope that was okay." Claire nodded slowly. "More than okay." He leaned in, brushed the back of his hand gently against her forehead. "No more fever. You must have pushed yourself too hard." She closed her eyes briefly at the touch. His skin was warm, steadying. There was silence between them, not awkward, but full of the words they had not yet spoken, of the emotions that had been building for weeks. Claire opened her eyes again, studying his face in the soft light, the worry etched into his brow, the gentleness in his mouth, the careful quiet he always carried like a shield. "Why?" she whispered. Julian tilted his head. "Why what? Why are you like this?" Her voice cracked. "Why are you so kind to me?" He looked down at the book in his hand, thumb brushing over the title. "Because real beauty doesn't demand attention," he said at last. "It just needs someone to witness it, quietly, completely." Claire bit her lip. Her throat burned. She turned her face to the side, not to hide the tears that threatened, but to contain them, to feel them fully without breaking apart. Then, a knock at the door. Both of them stiffened. Julian stood. "Want me to get that?" Claire nodded, suddenly cold. He walked across the room and opened the door. There, dripping in the rain, stood Tyler. He looked different, less polished, more desperate. His smile faltered when he saw Julian. But then his eyes flicked to Claire, lingering, calculating. "You look good," he said, confident, sexy even. "I'd been thinking maybe we rushed things. Maybe we could try again." Claire stood, blanket falling from her shoulders. She walked forward, slow and sure. Rainlight flickered in her hair. Her voice, when it came, was calm and clear. "I'm not the girl you left behind, Tyler, and I will never again be the woman waiting for you to come back." Tyler's expression shifted, confused, angry, but he said nothing. Julian watched from behind her, silent but solid. And then Tyler turned and walked away. Claire closed the door. The lock clicked softly. She turned to Julian. "You did not have to save me," she said. Julian looked into her eyes. "I did not," he replied. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you it was possible." In that quiet, something new bloomed, not loud, not rushed. Just real. Just enough. Trust. Claire's world blinked out without warning. She was reaching for a carton of almond milk in the dimly lit aisle of the 24-hour supermarket, trying to focus through the fatigue clouding her mind. Her vision blurred. The buzzing fluorescent lights overhead seemed to stretch and flicker. She barely registered the thud of her knees hitting the floor before everything went black. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer at the store. She was home. Her apartment was dim and quiet. She was lying on the couch, wrapped in the knit blanket she kept for cold nights. The air smelled faintly of lemon and something warm, chicken soup maybe. The table lamp cast a golden glow across the room. And there, sitting a few feet away in the armchair, slumped sideways with a book in his lap, was Julian. For a moment Claire thought she was dreaming, but then her throat burned with thirst and her arms trembled slightly as she sat up. Julian stirred. His eyes blinked open, hazy with sleep, until he saw her and instantly leaned forward, his expression etched with concern. "You're awake," he said gently. His voice was quiet, but relief threaded every word. Claire nodded slowly. "What happened?" "You fainted. I was just grabbing something for dinner. I saw you collapse and rushed over. You were burning up." He paused, sitting forward to feel her forehead with the back of his hand. Still warm, but better than earlier. She stared at him, at the way his brows furrowed when he checked her pulse, at the bowl of soup on the coffee table, still steaming faintly. He had stayed. He had taken care of her. Her voice cracked. "You didn't have to do all this." He looked at her, then at the book in his lap, The Courage to Love Yourself. He gave a half smile. "Maybe I didn't," he said, "but I wanted to." Claire's throat tightened. "Why?" Julian hesitated, then set the book down. "Because you matter. Not just as a patient, not just because of what you've been through, but because you're someone who forgot how worthy she is, and someone had to remind you." Claire blinked, tears pricking her eyes. Just then, a sharp knock echoed through the quiet apartment. She tensed. Julian stood and walked to the door, glancing back at her. She nodded faintly. He opened the door and froze. Tyler stood there. "Bye." His hair was wet from the rain, and the grin he wore faltered when he saw Julian. Still, he stepped forward, hands tucked into his designer jacket. "I saw the video," he said. "The blog. Everything. You've changed, Claire. You look good. Confident. Sexy." Claire stood slowly, heart pounding, not with fear but clarity. Tyler smiled. "Maybe we could try again. Maybe this time it could work." Claire met his eyes, steady and cold. "I'm not the girl you walked away from," she said, "and I'll never be the woman who waits for you to return." Tyler blinked. Julian remained behind her, silent and unmoving. Tyler opened his mouth as if to speak again, but no words came. He turned and walked away, rain falling behind him. Claire closed the door with a click. Her hand rested on the wood for a moment, breathing slowly. When she turned back, Julian was still there. "I should have said that a long time ago," she whispered. Julian stepped forward, his voice quiet. "You said it when it mattered." She looked at him, really looked. The man who'd seen her without armor. The one who never once tried to fix her. Just stood by and believed. "You didn't just carry me home tonight," she said softly. "You reminded me that I have one." Julian reached out, took her hand. "You built that home, Claire. I just made sure the lights stayed on." And as her fingers curled into his, Claire knew this wasn't rescue. This was love, patient and real, in the quiet that followed the storm. Claire's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked, a silent heartbeat on the empty screen. Outside, the rain tapped a soft rhythm against the fogged-up window pane, and inside her apartment, every corner held its breath. The hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the distant sound of tires on wet pavement, everything was still. Everything but her. Her heart trembled beneath her ribs, not out of fear, but anticipation. The kind of quiet shiver that comes when you are about to name something you were once afraid to look at. She inhaled deeply and began to type. From scars to courage. Wah. It was the phrase she had whispered to herself in her darkest hours, the ones between midnight and morning, when the world was silent and self-doubt screamed the loudest, when she lay awake wondering if the pain would ever be more than just pain, if her story would ever be more than just survival. It was not a title. It was a vow. The blog was her space now, not curated, not filtered, real, soft in some places, raw in others, like her own heart learning to beat again. In her first post, Claire did not talk about breast implants or body image, about betrayal or beauty. Instead, she wrote about shame. The kind of shame that wraps around your voice until it forgets how to speak. The kind that makes you shrink in your own clothes, apologize for your presence, hide in pictures. She wrote about silence, how it can be louder than anything when it fills the space between who you are and who the world tells you to be. She wrote about the boy who made her feel like she was too little, too plain, too play. And she wrote about the man who saw her without asking her to change. She wrote about looking in the mirror for the first time without checking for flaws, but instead asking, "How do you feel today?" And then listening, really listening. She ended the post with a single sentence that had taken her 3 weeks and countless tears to write. "I am not a before or after photo. I am a person, and I am learning to love her." She stared at the sentence for a long time before she clicked publish. Then came the response. At first, a few comments, then dozens, then hundreds. Within a day, there were thousands. Messages flooded her inbox, some typed in perfect grammar, others messy and chaotic and full of exclamation marks and emojis. But they all held the same heartbeat. "Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You made me feel seen." I cried reading this. I thought I was alone. And then there was the message from a 17-year-old girl in Kansas. Claire read it at least 10 times, eyes blurry, hands trembling. "I used to think I had to be beautiful to be brave, but you showed me I only have to be brave to be me." Claire printed that letter, cut it carefully with shaky hands, and taped it to her mirror. Every morning she read it before brushing her teeth. It reminded her why she had started, why she would not stop. With each new post, some hopeful, some full of doubt, some half-finished but honest, Julian would quietly share the link. No fanfare, no long captions. But always, always a message would arrive in her inbox not long after. "You are the embodiment of healing." Those 6 words never failed to stop her in her tracks. One afternoon, Claire sat by the window, her laptop warming her knees, a cup of tea in her hand. She stared at a photo she had taken days earlier, her reflection in a puddle, rain falling like tiny comets across the surface. The image was imperfect, blurred, fragmented. She had titled it Becoming. She posted it without a caption. That night, a woman wrote to her, "That image? That's how I feel every morning. Like I'm still coming into focus. But I'm still standing." Claire wrote back, simply, "Standing is enough. You're still here. That's powerful." And that was when she understood. This blog, this space, was no longer just for her. She had become a mirror, a voice, a gentle lighthouse for women still finding their shore. She was not writing from pain anymore. She was writing from power. Not the kind that screams, the kind that grows, like roots in quiet soil, like wings in a silent room. And when a reader would write, "You help me see myself," Claire would smile, hand on her heart, and whisper to herself, "You help me see myself too." The gallery was small, tucked between an old bookstore and a flower shop in downtown Seattle. From the outside, it looked ordinary: brick walls, a single glass door, soft yellow lights glowing behind white curtains. But inside it carried the kind of silence that asked people to listen with their hearts, not just their eyes. Claire hesitated at the threshold. It had been a year since she last saw Julian. Their lives had crossed, unraveled, and rewoven in ways neither of them expected. And now he had invited her here. No details, just a message. "There's something I want to show you." She stepped inside. Ah! The air was warm and faintly scented with lavender. The lights were dim, focused only on one wall at the back of the gallery, where a single frame hung. It was a watercolor. Claire froze. She knew the image instantly. The small girl sitting in the corner of a dark room. And behind her, the faintest outline of wings, unfolding, becoming. That same sketch she had once scribbled in her journal, when she felt invisible, when she was trying, just barely, to survive. But here, it was not in pencil. It was in color. Soft purples, hopeful blues, golden light bleeding in through cracks she had not drawn before. Julian had painted this. She took a trembling step closer, eyes glistening. Beneath the frame, engraved into the wooden plaque, were the words, "You are my most beautiful recovery." A voice behind her, soft, familiar. "Claire." She turned. "Why?" Julian stood there, no white coat, no clipboard. Just a man in a simple button-down shirt, eyes filled with something deeper than admiration. Reverence. Love. He took a slow breath. "I have been part of many healings. Watched countless scars fade, seen strength return to bodies I once feared might never move again. But none of them," he paused, voice shaking slightly, "none of them changed me the way you did." Claire stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Julian continued, his voice steady now. "I do not want to be your doctor anymore, Claire. I want to be the person who walks beside you, not in silence, not in distance, but hand in hand, through whatever comes next." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny velvet pouch. Claire's breath caught. Inside was a ring, not gold, not diamond, but simple silver. Engraved on the inside, breathe. Shine. Choose. Julian knelt, not out of tradition, but out of truth. Will you choose me, Claire Weston, as I have already chosen you? Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Not from surprise, not from fear, but from knowing. She took his hand and dropped to her knees with him, eye to eye. For the first time in my life, she whispered, I choose myself, and I choose you. He smiled, wide and full of quiet joy, as he slid the ring onto her finger. They didn't kiss immediately. Instead, they rested their foreheads together, soaking in the stillness that had once felt like isolation, but now felt like home. Later, they sat on the gallery floor, backs against the wall, fingers entwined. Claire leaned her head on Julian's shoulder. You turned my pain into art, she said softly. You turned it into light, he replied. Outside, the sky darkened into twilight. Inside, the painting glowed like a lantern, proof that even the smallest wings, once noticed, can change everything. Sometimes the deepest scars do not show on skin, but in silence, in shame, in the stories we're too afraid to tell. Claire Weston was once a girl who hid her body, her voice, her truth. But through pain, through stillness, and through one man who truly saw her, she discovered something far greater than beauty. She found worth. She found healing. She found love. And maybe, so can you. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Every week we bring you powerful, real-life inspired tales of transformation, hope, and the kind of love that heals from the inside out. Because your soul deserves stories that stir it. Subscribe now, and let your heart be moved. Help me. A homeless girl pulled a man from a lake, only to discover he owned the mansion across the water. And, don't come any closer. Elisa's voice trembled as the cold breeze licked at her cheeks, already damp with tears. She stood barefoot at the very edge of the lake, her worn coat flapping against her frail frame in the October wind. The moon was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, and only the dim shimmer of streetlights from across the water gave any hint of illumination. Her breath came in uneven gasps, hands clenched at her sides, as if the physical pain in her chest could somehow match the ache in her soul. She had stood there for nearly 10 minutes, toes curled over the edge of the mossy rocks, the dark water below like a final invitation. Her body shivered, not just from the cold, but from the weight of the decision she was about to make. I am so sorry, she whispered, barely audible, her voice cracking. I tried. I really tried. She closed her eyes and tilted her face up to the wind. In her mind, images flashed. Her little brother's laughter, her grandmother's wrinkled hands folding worn clothes, the pain in the doctor's eyes when he said the word late stage. Then, help me. A voice, barely a whisper, distant, raw. Eliza's eyes snapped open. She looked around, confused, thinking perhaps it was her imagination, until she heard it again, louder, urgent. Help somebody, please! She turned toward the sound, squinting into the darkness over the lake. There, just past the reeds, the faint outline of a person thrashing in the freezing water. A man, drowning. For a moment, Eliza froze. Her mind raced. This was not supposed to happen. Not tonight. Not when she had already decided to let go. But something inside her snapped. Without thinking, she ran. The water was shockingly cold. The moment it touched her skin, it stole her breath away. Still, she dove in. Her arms fought the resistance of the waves as she swam toward him. He was flailing, eyes wide with terror, head going under and coming back up with violent coughs. She reached him just as he slipped beneath the surface. "Hold on," she shouted, wrapping her arms around his chest and kicking furiously. He was heavy, nearly unconscious, and the pull of the lake was merciless. Her legs cramped, Her lungs screamed for air, but inch by inch she dragged him toward the shore. When they finally reached land, she collapsed beside him, soaked and shaking. She rolled him over, pressed against his chest, and started compressions. "Breathe," she cried, her voice ragged. "Come on, breathe." He choked suddenly, coughing up water, gasping for air. She helped him sit up, her hands supporting his back. For a long moment they sat there in silence, only the sound of water dripping from their clothes and the wind rustling the reeds around them. The man turned his head slightly, struggling to focus. "Why?" he croaked. "Why did you save me?" Eliza looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were bloodshot, skin pale, hair plastered to his forehead, and yet, beneath the exhaustion there was something else. Confusion. Vulnerability. Her answer came without hesitation. "I just wanted to do something that mattered," she said softly. "Something good before I go." His brow furrowed, breath catching. "Go where?" She glanced back at the lake. The answer hung in the air between them like a ghost. He blinked, as if the realization punched the breath from his lungs. "You were going to—" She nodded slowly. Not ashamed, not crying anymore. "I have cancer. There is nothing they can do. And I will not put my family through more pain. Not when we have nothing left to give." Silence stretched between them. Then finally, he whispered, "But you saved me." She met his gaze, eyes calm now, almost peaceful. "Because maybe that is the only thing I was meant to do." For the first time in his life, Dylan, who had always believed he had control, answers, purpose, felt entirely lost. And yet sitting there with this stranger, soaked to the bone and shivering in the darkness, he also felt something he had not felt in years. Alive. Two broken souls, clinging to the edge of the same abyss, had collided, and somehow, together, they were still here. The rain had begun to fall in a soft mist as Eliza guided Dylan through the narrow alleys behind the lake. He leaned on her slightly, still weak from nearly drowning, saying nothing of the soreness in his limbs or the burning in his throat. She glanced back at him now and then, hesitant, unsure if bringing him here was a mistake. They stopped in front of a crumbling shack with a roof patched by tarp and wood, walls weathered by time, and a threadbare curtain for a door. "Just for a bit," Eliza murmured, pushing it aside. Inside, dim lamplight cast flickering shadows across cracked walls. A metal basin caught steady drips from the ceiling. Smoke curled from a makeshift stove, where a frail, elderly woman stirred a pot with a bent spoon. A young boy lay curled on a thin mat, reading a tattered comic by flashlight. "Grandma," Eliza said gently. "He's a friend." The old woman rose with difficulty, wiping her hands on an apron. "Come in. It's cold." Dylan stepped inside and nodded. "Thank you." The boy looked at Eliza, then at Dylan, curious, cautious. She smiled faintly and gave a small shake of her head. "No danger." They gathered near the fire. The old woman poured hot water into chipped cups. "No tea," she said apologetically. "Just warmth." "It's perfect," Dylan replied. Silence settled around them. Eliza sat with her knees to her chest, eyes fixed on the flames. "How long have you lived here?" Dylan asked quietly. 4 years, Eliza answered. "After my father died, we were evicted. This was the only roof we could find." Dylan glanced around. Bare concrete, worn blankets, mosquito nets sagging from rusted nails. He turned to the boy. "Do you go to school?" "I want to, but I help Eliza collect cans. We sell them." Dylan looked at her. "You do all this?" "We do what we must," she said. "I worked in a noodle shop once. Too slow, they let me go." Her voice was flat, resigned. Dylan noticed how thin she was, how exhaustion clung to her face. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked gently. Eliza hugged her knees tighter. "Because no one hires a sick girl who can't read. Because when you're like me, poor, tired, people think it's your fault." She paused, then whispered, "I have ovarian cancer. Late stage. I stopped treatment months ago. It's too expensive. We barely afford rice. If I keep trying, I'll just take from them." She gestured toward her grandmother and brother. "They're all I have. I'd rather disappear quietly than see them suffer more." Dylan stared at the fire for a long moment, then turned to her, voice steady. "Eliza, do you think your death would make things easier for them? That your brother will grow strong, knowing his sister gave up? That your grandmother will find peace, watching you fade?" She said nothing. "You saved me," he said, a stranger, without hesitation. "But you can't save yourself." Her chin trembled. "You're not a burden," he whispered. "You are the reason they keep going. You're their hope." Tears welled in her eyes. One slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "I know," he said softly. "But sometimes being tired is where healing begins, if you let someone help you." Eliza looked at him, and for the first time in years, someone was truly seeing her, not with pity or judgment, but with belief, and that belief began to settle quietly inside her. The next morning arrived with a surprising stillness. The rain had stopped, and sunlight spilled gently through the cracks in the shack's weathered roof. Eliza stirred from sleep, her thin blanket barely warding off the morning chill. She stood up, rubbing her eyes, and stepped outside to fetch water from the communal tap. But something stopped her. A small package sat neatly by the door, wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine. A handwritten note was tucked beneath the string, "For a new day, from a friend of an angel." Inside were 2 cartons of milk, a loaf of soft bread, and a sealed container of warm soup. Eliza stood there for several seconds, her breath caught in her throat. She looked around, but the alley was empty. No footsteps, no voices. That afternoon, her grandmother returned from the market, wide-eyed and nearly speechless. "Child, you will not believe this. Someone bought every single thing in my basket before I could even set up my stand. Paid double." Eliza stared at her, stunned. "Who?" "I do not know. A man, tall, wore a cap low, said it was for his staff." Eliza's heart began to pound, a suspicion quietly blooming in the back of her mind. But she said nothing. The next day, another package arrived, and the next. Always food, always warm, always anonymous. By the end of the week, a social worker from a local charity knocked at their door. "We've been alerted about your living conditions," the woman said kindly. "There's a safe shelter available, private room, warm beds, hot showers. We'd like to offer you a temporary residence." Eliza frowned. "Who told you about us?" The woman smiled. "A donor, who prefers to stay anonymous, but he insists you deserve better." Eliza was hesitant, suspicious. She had learned that good things often came with strings attached, but when she saw her brother's hopeful face, heard his small voice say, "Will it have a roof that does not leak?" she knew she had to try. They moved into the shelter the next day. It was modest but warm. Clean, safe. For the first time in months, Eliza and her family slept without fear of rain or rats. That evening, as the sun dipped below the lake's edge, they went for a walk, following the soft lights along the new stone path by the water. As they passed a small food cart, a familiar voice called out, "Evening!" Eliza turned and saw Dylan, casually dressed, holding 3 steaming cobs of grilled corn. "Fancy seeing you here," he said with a grin. She blinked. "You?" He held out the food. "I thought this might make a perfect dinner, unless you are too fancy for street corn now." Her lips curved before she could stop herself. "Never." They sat on a bench beneath a flickering lamppost, steam rising from the food in their hands. Dylan handed her a cup of hot tea and smiled as she inhaled deeply. "It smells like home," she whispered. Her grandmother and brother chatted nearby, laughing with a vendor. Eliza turned to Dylan. "Why are you doing all this?" "I like corn," he replied. She rolled her eyes. "Seriously?" He looked at her for a moment, then said more softly, "Because I owe you my life. Because I see something in you that maybe you have not seen in yourself for a long time." She looked away, cheeks flushing. After they ate, Dylan suggested a walk around the lake. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet grass and distant pine. They walked in silence for a while, their footsteps crunching softly over fallen leaves. Eliza spoke first. "When I was little, my father used to bring me here. We would sit under that big oak and pretend the lake was the sea and he was a fisherman with magical nets." "What happened to him?" Dylan asked gently. "He died, trying to give us a better life. He was stronger than me. He never gave up. You are strong too, Eliza." She shook her head. "I am tired, not strong. Even tired people can be brave," he said. "You jumped into a freezing lake for someone you did not know." She paused, absorbing that. They reached the edge of a small pier. Moonlight shimmered on the surface of the water. Dylan stood beside her, close enough for their shoulders to brush. A gentle breeze passed between them. Without thinking, their hands brushed, skin against skin. They both froze. Eliza looked at him, startled. He was already looking at her. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then both pulled back, flustered, murmuring apologies. But something had shifted. In the quiet that followed, in the soft sound of waves lapping against the dock, something unspoken hung between them. A promise. A beginning neither had expected. Eliza had never enjoyed going to the market. The bustling noise, the hurried footsteps, the sharp elbows and colder stares, it all made her feel invisible at best, unworthy at worst. But with Dylan beside her, everything felt just a little different. They walked together down the narrow path lined with stalls, where vendors called out prices and bargained with locals. Dylan carried a woven basket, insisting on helping, though Eliza told him she had done this alone 100 times. "You should let me carry something," he said with a teasing smile. "After all, I owe you my life." "You paid me with soup and street corn," she replied, raising an eyebrow. "We are even." But when they reached her grandmother's usual vendor, an impatient customer shoved past them, nearly knocking over the little stand. The woman glared at Eliza's grandmother and muttered, "You people in your charity stalls, just get out of the way." Eliza stepped forward, fists clenched, but before she could speak, Dylan was there. "I believe she was here first," he said calmly, but with an unmistakable firmness. "And if you cannot wait like a decent human being, perhaps the market is not for you." The woman sputtered and walked away without a word. Eliza stared at him. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Dylan replied simply. That evening the clouds rolled in again. A soft drizzle fell over the quiet streets, as Dylan and Eliza walked beneath a shared umbrella. They stopped at a small corner stall that sold instant noodles in foam cups, hot, salty, and strangely comforting. They sat under an awning with 2 steaming cups between them, steam curling into the cool air. Raindrops tapped gently on the plastic roof above. Dylan shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. She froze. "You will get soaked," she protested. "I will dry," he said, his voice low. "You need it more." Something about the simplicity of it, no hesitation, no expectations, made something in her crack. She looked at him, really looked. He was soaked, rain dripping down his hair and onto his lashes, and yet he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. And suddenly she laughed. A real, unguarded, unfiltered laugh. Dylan turned to her, surprised. "What? I just forgot how that felt," she said between giggles. "What? Rain?" "No." She looked at him, her laughter fading into a soft smile. To laugh, to feel not invisible. His eyes lingered on her, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then Eliza whispered, almost afraid of her own voice, "I have never had anyone be this kind to me." Dylan did not speak. He just looked at her, eyes shining with something unspoken, something far deeper than gratitude or affection, something approaching reverence. The next day, Dylan casually invited her and her family to visit the garden of a home he said belonged to a friend of his, never mentioning it was in fact his. "I think you will like it," he told her. "It is quiet, beautiful, peaceful." Eliza hesitated. "I do not belong in places like that." "You saved someone's life," Dylan replied. "You belong wherever you want to be." She relented. When they arrived, the large iron gates opened slowly. Beyond them, manicured lawns stretched out, and a path of cobblestone led to a modest yet elegant white mansion surrounded by maple trees, their leaves turning gold and crimson in the fall air. "I just want to show you the garden," Dylan said, sensing her hesitation. As they wandered through the rows of flowers and tall hedges, her little brother ran ahead, laughing, and her grandmother marveled at the variety of plants. Eliza watched them in disbelief, so unused to seeing them so free, so light. "You arranged this, didn't you?" she asked Dylan softly. He gave a nonchalant shrug. "I made a few calls," she smiled, touched. Later, they sat on a wooden bench under a trellis, wrapped in climbing roses. Dylan pulled out a small notebook and a pencil. "I want to show you something," he said. "Will you trust me?" Eliza nodded. He opened the book and wrote in large, clear letters, E-L-I-Z-A, he. He pointed to each letter. "That is your name, and we are going to learn how to read it." She blinked. "But I never can. We will go slow." Letter by letter, sound by sound, he guided her through it, and when she read it aloud, halting but whole, he flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "Everyone deserves a second chance at hope." Eliza stared at the words. Her lips parted, her eyes glistened, and then she cried, not from sorrow, but from the unfamiliar weight of being seen. Truly, deeply seen. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the high-arched windows of the library. Dust danced in golden shafts of light, settling gently over shelves lined with books of every age and subject. Eliza moved slowly, her fingers grazing the spines as she wiped down the surfaces, still awed by how quiet the place felt, like a cathedral made of memory and silence. Dylan had asked if she might want to help reorganize the old library. "You love stories," he had said. "Let's create a place where they live again." She had smiled then, touched by his thoughtfulness, unaware of the shadow that lay waiting in the shelves. As she carefully dusted a row of framed photographs on the wall, one particular frame caught her eye. The photo was in black and white, slightly tilted. It showed a group of staff members standing proudly in the garden of the estate, groundskeepers, cooks, cleaners, and in the back, almost hidden, stood a man with a gentle smile and a hand resting protectively on a small girl's shoulder. Eliza stared. Her breath hitched. She stepped closer, heart pounding. It was him, her father. He looked younger, stronger, but she would never mistake those eyes or that quiet pride in his posture. And the little girl beside him, blonde hair, barefoot, laughing, it was her. The floor beneath her seemed to shift. "No," she whispered. "No." The photo was labeled, "Staff of Rosewood Estate, 11 years ago." Suddenly, everything came crashing back. The rumors. The night her father came home pale, holding a small crumpled paper in his hands. The accusation of theft, the disgrace, the job lost. And then the years that followed, one harder than the next. Him trying to find work again, doors closing in his face, sleepless nights hauling crates at the docks, the accident, the blood, the goodbye that came too soon. Her fingers trembled as she set the frame down. Her eyes burned. The man she had saved, the man who had walked with her around the lake, who had shared noodles with her under a rain-soaked awning, who had gently guided her hand as she traced her name. He lived in the house that destroyed her father. She turned and left. No word, no note, no glance behind her. She ran through the garden, her footsteps loud against the stone path. Her lungs ached, but she did not stop until the gates of the estate were behind her and the trees swallowed her whole. That night, under a moonless sky, she sat on the same dock where she had once pulled Dylan from the water. The air was cold, biting, but she did not move. The pain was a storm inside her, howling with betrayal, confusion, and a sorrow that felt newly born even though it had been with her all her life. Her voice cracked in the darkness, low and bitter. "I saved the wrong man." And then louder, stronger, breaking, "I saved the wrong man." The lake did not answer. The wind did not care. She buried her face in her knees, rocking back and forth. The image of her father's smile burned behind her eyelids. That place, his last honest job, the place that spat him out without mercy, had belonged to Dylan all along. Had he known? Was this pity? Was she just part of some twisted redemption story he had created for himself? Eliza sobbed until her chest ached and her body trembled with exhaustion. She thought of leaving again, disappearing, letting the silence reclaim her like it had almost done that night she stood at the edge of the water. But this time, something held her back. Not hope, not love, anger. She needed answers, not silence, not running. But tonight all she had was the cold and her tears, and a heart breaking all over again. Dylan had not slept in days. Ever since Eliza had run from the estate, something inside him had cracked open. Her absence echoed in every hallway, every quiet corner where her laughter used to live, the bench under the rose trellis, the garden path they had walked side by side, the library where she first traced her name. Without her, all of it felt hollow. And the photo. He had gone back to it that same night, stared long and hard at the man in the back row, the little girl holding his hand. He had known the story vaguely, something his father once muttered about a theft, a betrayal, and a necessary dismissal. He had never asked questions. But now, he needed answers, and he would find them. Days later, Dylan stood in the dusty archive room in the back of the estate, leafing through old staff records and disciplinary files. Hours passed, cobwebs clung to his sleeves. His eyes burned from the tiny print, but finally he found it. A file marked Harold James, Incident Report, 11 years ago. Inside were statements, one from a manager named Randall Price, claiming to have witnessed Harold stealing a valuable brooch. The item had gone missing during a private party hosted by Dylan's father. The report was signed, sealed, but something did not sit right. Dylan dug deeper. He found old expense logs. Randall Price had large, unexplained cash deposits around that time. There were complaints from other staff members buried in side memos, allegations of intimidation, favoritism, missing supplies. Most had been dismissed by Dylan's father, who trusted Price implicitly. Finally, at the bottom of one envelope was a note, an unsigned statement from a former maid who had seen Price with the missing brooch the night before the event. It had never been followed up. Dylan's chest tightened. He felt sick. He knew what he had to do. That evening, he walked through the familiar alleyways with a file tucked beneath his coat. His steps led him to the small, broken building that used to be Eliza's shelter, the place he had first followed her to, the night she saved his life. He knocked softly. Eliza's little brother opened the door, wide-eyed. "It's him." Eliza stood behind him, tired, cautious. Her grandmother appeared beside her, clutching a scarf around her thin shoulders. Dylan took a breath, then dropped to one knee. He opened the file and held it up with both hands. "I found the truth," he said, voice steady despite the pounding in his heart. "Randall Price, my father's trusted manager, stole that brooch. He framed your father. My father believed the wrong man." Eliza's breath caught. Dylan looked up, pain in his eyes. "I cannot undo what happened. I cannot bring your father back, but I can give you this, his name, his honor, the truth." He turned to her grandmother. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. On behalf of my family, I am sorry." The old woman stared at him for a moment, lips trembling. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him, and began to cry. Not the kind of cry that comes from anger, but from relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving my son back." Dylan held her gently, his own eyes stinging. Eliza watched in silence, tears slipping down her cheeks. She stepped forward, barely able to speak. "My father was finally cleared," she whispered, her voice cracked. Dylan rose slowly, face to face with her now. "I should have told you everything sooner," he said. "But I was afraid of losing the one person who made me want to be better." Eliza looked at him, her expression torn between sorrow and something deeper, something beginning to mend. She took the file from his hands, holding it to her chest. "I grew up hating this house," she said softly. "But today you made it a place where the truth lives." And for the first time since that terrible night, she took a step toward him instead of away. They stood once again beneath the trellis in the garden, just like that first afternoon when Dylan had shown her the roses and taught her to spell her name. But this time, the air felt different. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to her. Eliza opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a deed, a legal document. Her eyes widened. "Rosewood Estate? I own it," Dylan said gently. "I have since my father passed 2 years ago." She stared at him, stunned. "All this time, you were—" He nodded. "I wanted you to see me as I was. Not as a name, not as a house. Just the man you pulled from the lake." Silence stretched between them. Her heart pounded, caught between anger, confusion, and something softer she could not yet name. Dylan stepped closer. "Eliza, I am not the estate. I am not the legacy of my father's mistakes. I am the man who was drowning, and you saved me. And now, all I want is to help you live." Her eyes filled with tears. She had spent so long believing she was invisible, insignificant. Yet here he was, offering her not pity, but a hand to hold through the storm. She nodded. "I will try," she whispered. "Not just for me, but for them, and for you." The first day of chemotherapy was cold and gray. Eliza sat in a recliner chair, a thin blanket over her knees. The sterile smell of antiseptic clung to everything. But beside her sat Dylan, holding a small speaker playing soft piano music. On the tray table was a warm croissant and a paperback book she had started to read, slowly, painfully, but with determination. "Page 10 today?" he asked with a smile. She nodded, leaning into his shoulder. Each session followed the same rhythm. Dylan never missed a single appointment. Some days he brought coloring books, other days a jar of wildflowers from the garden. Once he even brought her a tiny music box that played a lullaby she remembered from childhood. And Eliza, against all odds, began to feel stronger. The side effects came, of course, nausea, fatigue, but her spirits held firm. Hope had taken root. One afternoon after her 3rd week of treatment, Dylan appeared with a paper bag. "Close your eyes," he said. She frowned. "What are you up to?" "Just trust me." When she opened her eyes, he was holding out a dress, simple, cream-colored cotton with delicate stitching along the hem. "I saw it in a shop window," he said, almost shyly. "I thought, maybe it would make you feel as beautiful as I see you." Her hand went to her mouth. No one had ever given her something so thoughtful. Later that evening she tried it on in the shelter's mirror. It fit perfectly. She stared at her reflection, her thin frame, her pale skin, the short fuzz where her hair used to be. But for the first time, she did not see sickness. She saw survival. That night, as they sat again beneath the trellis, she turned to Dylan, her voice barely a whisper. "I used to think I was going to die." He looked at her, eyes steady. "But now," she said, the smallest smile tugging at her lips, "I think I can live." Dylan reached for her hand and held it tight. "Then let us live," he said. Together. A year passed. The seasons turned gently, as if the world itself had decided to move more tenderly around Eliza. Spring arrived with soft winds and blossoms that lined the town's narrow streets. Eliza stood at the library desk in a modest skirt and blouse, her hair now short and soft with new growth, her eyes bright with energy that hadn't lived there before. She had taken a job as an assistant at the town library. Small tasks at first, shelving books, managing returns, but soon she began something more meaningful, leading reading classes for elderly townspeople who had grown up without ever learning the alphabet. She would smile patiently, guiding their fingers across the page, repeating sounds gently, encouraging each syllable like it was sacred, just as Dylan had done for her. Some days, she would catch her reflection in the library window, and for a fleeting second, not recognize herself. Not the girl who had stood at the edge of the lake, but the woman who had chosen to step back from it and build a life. Dylan had kept his promise too. The Rosewood estate had undergone a transformation, not into a private fortress, but into a place of refuge. He opened the doors to a new mission, a residential center for homeless families and terminally ill patients who had no one else. He named it Echoes of Eliza. "I wanted it to remind the world," he said at the opening ceremony, "that one act of courage can echo for generations." People cried, donors stepped forward, volunteers signed up. The town, once too busy to see a girl in rags, now listened, learned, changed. Eliza stood beside Dylan that day, her hand in his, eyes glistening with quiet pride. On the anniversary of the night they met, Dylan proposed. It was simple, just the two of them beneath the rose trellis, the same place where she had read her name for the first time. She said yes, with tears in her eyes and laughter in her voice. And on a warm summer afternoon, by the same lake where their story began, they were married. Only close friends and family were invited. A gentle breeze rustled the trees and the surface of the water shimmered with gold. Eliza wore the cream-colored dress Dylan had once given her. Her little brother, now taller and proud, stood beside her, beaming. Their grandmother wiped her eyes with a handkerchief and whispered, "Finally, my granddaughter has a family." As the couple stood hand in hand, exchanging simple vows beneath an arch of white lilies, Eliza's brother stepped forward for a short speech. "My sister saved a man's life," he said, voice shaking but clear. "But that man didn't just survive. He gave us a home. He gave my sister her smile back. He gave me a future." He looked at them both. "She saved him, but he saved our family." There was not a dry eye in the crowd. As the sun began to set, Eliza and Dylan walked to the edge of the lake, the quiet lapping of water marking time like a soft lullaby. They sat together on the old dock, worn smooth from weather and memory. Her head rested on his shoulder, his hand warm in hers. The light played on the surface of the lake, just like it had that night, when darkness nearly swallowed them both. Only this time, it glowed. She turned to him, smiling through tears that had nothing to do with sorrow. "We both died a little inside," she whispered, "but we chose to live for each other." Dylan kissed the top of her head, and as the last light dipped below the horizon, the lake reflected not pain, not loss, but the quiet brilliance of two souls who had found their way home. Sometimes, life brings two broken souls together not by chance, but by purpose. Eliza saved a stranger from drowning, but in truth they saved each other. Through pain, healing, and love, they discovered that even the most shattered hearts can find their way back to light. And perhaps that is the quiet magic of kindness, of second chances, of love that asks for nothing yet gives everything. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories, where every week we bring you tales that heal, inspire, and remind us all of the beauty of the human spirit. Click subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and never miss a story that might just change your day or your life. Thank you for watching. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, love is always worth the fight. Poor nurse got a wrong call at 3 a.m. She showed up anyway, and the single dad CEO never let her leave. New York, early winter. The city lights outside Olivia's apartment flickered through the thin blinds like distant stars. It was 2:30 a.m. when she finally collapsed onto her narrow bed. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her blonde hair clung damply to her forehead, and her legs ached from the 14-hour emergency room shift she had just survived. The cold from the cracked window bit at her ankles, but she was too tired to care. She had just pulled off her surgical mask and was drifting into a half-sleep when her phone rang. The sharp sound sliced through the silence like a siren. Olivia groaned, rubbed her eyes, and blinked at the unfamiliar number on the screen. She answered. "Mama!" "Daddy's chest hurts again," a small voice whimpered. Olivia sat up, instantly alert. "I think you have the wrong number, sweetheart. Who is this?" The girl's voice trembled. You're not Mama? Are you a doctor?" Olivia's voice softened. "I'm a nurse. What's happening, honey? Daddy can't breathe. He's on the floor. Please help." Olivia's pulse quickened. "Where are you?" "I don't know. Our house is white. It has a black fence. And there's a red light in front. Mama wrote this number for emergencies." The child's voice cracked, and Olivia's heart broke a little. "I'm coming," she said without thinking. Still in her scrubs, Olivia grabbed her emergency kit, shoved her phone in her pocket, and raced out into the cold. The rain had started, light but icy. Her breath came out in fog as she got into her old car and pulled out of the driveway. She drove aimlessly at first, scanning every house, every street lamp. The neighborhoods blurred together in the shadows. Her hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles white. Then she saw it. An aging white house with a black wrought iron fence and a flickering red porch light. She parked on the curb, ran up the steps, and knocked hard. The door creaked open. A little girl, no older than 4, stood barefoot, her cheeks wet with tears. "You came," she whispered. "I told you I would," Olivia said gently. The girl led her inside. In the living room, a man lay collapsed on the floor, gasping, clutching his chest. Without hesitation, Olivia dropped to her knees, opened her bag, and began emergency treatment. His lips were pale, his breaths came in shallow rasps. She reached for her inhaler, applied pressure, talked to him steadily even though he could not respond. Finally, after long minutes, the man's breathing slowed. His chest rose and fell, no longer violently. His eyelids fluttered. He looked up at her, confused, voice hoarse. "Who are you?" Olivia exhaled shakily. "A little girl called me. She thought I was someone else. But she believed I could help, so I came." The man blinked slowly, and for the first time, Olivia saw his face in full light. Angular jaw, hollowed cheeks, and exhausted eyes that once must have been bright. He was no ordinary man. But at that moment, none of that mattered, because tonight a child's desperate belief had found its way into the hands of someone who would not let her down. The living room was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls. Olivia sat on the edge of the couch, her emergency bag still open beside her. The faint sound of an ambulance grew louder in the distance. She had done everything she could for now. Noah was breathing steadily again, though his skin still looked pale and drawn. A groan broke the silence. Noah stirred on the rug, lifting a hand to his chest, then his eyes opened slowly. He blinked at the ceiling, then turned his head and saw her. "You're not from the hospital," he said hoarsely, his voice cracking. "Who are you?" Olivia stood, brushing her knees. "I'm a nurse. I just got off shift. I got a call from a child, said her father couldn't breathe." Noah's brow furrowed. "A call? From who?" Before Olivia could answer, small footsteps echoed down the stairs. A little girl with messy dark hair and tear-streaked cheeks emerged from the shadows, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. "Lily," Noah whispered. He tried to sit up, but Olivia gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't strain yourself." Olivia crouched down to the girl's level. "Was it you who called me, sweetie?" Lily nodded slowly. I pushed the number Mommy gave me for when Daddy was sick." Olivia's heart clenched. "And your mommy, she's not here anymore." The girl shook her head. "She's in the sky, like the stars." Noah closed his eyes briefly, as if the words struck something deep. Olivia looked from Lily to him and back again. "I think she had my number before," Olivia said softly. "Your mom. Phone companies reuse them. I guess it just ended up with me." Lily's bottom lip trembled. "But you answered. You came." "I did," Olivia said. "And you were so brave to call." There was a knock on the door. The EMTs had arrived. Olivia guided them in and gave a quick report. They stabilized Noah, took his vitals, and set up a portable oxygen mask. He declined a trip to the hospital for now, insisting he would follow up with his doctor in the morning. When the commotion settled and the paramedics left, Olivia turned to go. Her eyes felt gritty with exhaustion. Her scrubs clung cold to her skin, and dawn was only an hour away. But as she reached for her coat, a small tug stopped her. "Lily!" The child's tiny fingers gripped the hem of Olivia's shirt. "Can you stay? Just a little bit longer," she asked, eyes wide and pleading. Olivia hesitated. Noah tried to sit up again, watching them. "You've done enough," he said, voice low but sincere. "You really didn't have to come here." Olivia met his gaze. "Maybe not. but someone called for help, and I'm not the kind of person who ignores that. Noah looked at his daughter, then back at Olivia. She hasn't talked much since her mom passed. She never calls anyone. I don't even know how she remembered the number. I guess, Olivia said, gently lifting Lily into her lap. Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind forgets. The room was quiet again. Olivia sat there holding Lily as the child leaned her head on her shoulder. Noah rested back on the couch, breathing slow and even, and in that small circle of silence, bound by grief, instinct, and one misplaced call, something fragile and new began to form, like the first warmth before sunrise. The clock on the mantel struck 5. Olivia had meant to leave long ago. Her shift had ended hours earlier, and exhaustion pulled at every fiber of her being. Yet she stayed, her legs folded under her on the living room rug, a warm blanket draped over her shoulders. Lily, now curled against her side, let out a soft sigh as Olivia gently ran fingers through the girl's tangled hair. The living room had grown quieter, more peaceful, the early morning light creeping in through the curtains. They had gone through 2 picture books, well-worn ones with torn corners and faint crayon scribbles. Olivia had fetched a warm bottle of milk from the fridge, guessing where things were by instinct. She had held Lily when the little girl's breath caught with grief mid-sentence, and whispered stories of brave owls and starry skies until her sobs turned into yawns. Noah, still weak but alert now, had watched from the couch, with a blanket over his legs. His breathing was less labored, the tightness in his chest relieved thanks to Olivia's quick actions. He had not spoken much, his voice still hoarse, but his eyes never strayed far from the sight of his daughter. Finally asleep, wrapped in warmth and comfort, clinging to a stranger as if she had known her all her life. It stirred something in him, a strange mixture of guilt, gratitude, and something else he could not name. I'm not sure how to thank you, he said finally, breaking the silence. Olivia looked up. You do not need to. You saved my life. I was just there, she replied softly, at the right time. He leaned back against the cushions, exhaling slowly. No, you were what she needed, what I needed, even if by mistake. Olivia smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. She's a strong little girl. She knew what to do. Most adults would panic. She has not spoken to anyone like that in over a year, Noah murmured, since her mother passed. I tried therapists, school counselors, nothing worked. Then tonight, you. Olivia's eyes drifted back to the child nestled at her side. Maybe she just needed to be the one helping someone this time. Sometimes that's how healing starts. The room fell silent again, a shared stillness, a stillness of survivors. As the sun began to rise, Olivia gently lifted Lily and carried her to the small bed upstairs, tucking the covers around her, pausing to smooth down her hair. She lingered for a moment, watching the child breathe peacefully, then tiptoed back downstairs. Noah was sitting upright now, the oxygen mask resting beside him. Could I ask you something? He said, his tone uncertain. Of course. Would you consider coming by again, just for a bit? I don't know what this was. I don't expect anything, but Lily, I have not seen her that calm since Anna died. Olivia looked at him for a long time. The exhaustion behind his eyes was deep, deeper than what a single night of missed sleep could cause. It was the kind that came from carrying too much, too long, alone. I work most nights, she said gently, and I have classes in the day. He nodded quickly. I understand. It was just... He cut himself off, not wanting to sound desperate. Olivia picked up her things. It was a strange night. He chuckled dryly. That's one way to put it. She walked to the door, pulled it open, then paused. Slowly, she turned back and reached into her bag. From a side pocket, she took out a sealed box and placed it on the side table. An emergency inhaler, she said. For the next time you forget your meds. You are not billing me for that, are you? He teased, raising a brow. No, she said with a small smirk. But I might stop by to check your pulse now and then, free of charge. Noah smiled. It was not wide, it was not perfect, but it was real, and that was something he had not felt in weeks. Olivia stepped outside, pulling her coat tighter against the early morning chill. The street was still quiet, bathed in pale orange light. As she walked to her car, she glanced back once at the small white house. The house with the red porch light, and the child who had dialed the wrong number that turned out to be exactly right. She did not know what would come next. But for now, she knew she would return. Not out of obligation, not out of pity, but because something about this broken little family had settled deep inside her, and she was not ready to let go. Each day began the same way now. Olivia would arrive at the White House with the iron fence and red porch light around 9 a.m., always bringing something small, a storybook, a fresh pastry, or a new coloring set for Lily. The little girl would wait at the window, nose pressed against the glass, waving as Olivia pulled up. Noah usually watched from the kitchen, silently sipping coffee, half grateful and half unsure what this routine was becoming. Olivia never stayed long. At first, just an hour or two, she would read to Lily, make her laugh, pick up scattered toys, and gently remind Noah to take his medication or eat something that wasn't reheated pizza. She never imposed, yet somehow she became part of the rhythm of the house. Not loud, not flashy, just present. One morning, Lily tugged Olivia into her tiny art corner and showed her a crayon drawing, a stick figure with long yellow hair standing between two other figures, one tall. "That's you," she said proudly, pointing to the figure in the middle. "Me and Daddy are holding your hand so you don't get lost." Olivia's heart clenched. Noah saw the drawing later that day and said nothing, but when Olivia went to the kitchen, she found a note beside a cup of tea he had brewed for her. "Thanks for not getting lost." That evening, after Lily had gone to bed and the house settled into its usual soft hush, Olivia and Noah sat on opposite ends of the living room. A documentary about marine life played on the TV, but neither really watched. "Do you ever miss it?" Olivia asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Noah looked up. "Miss what?" "Running a company, wearing suits, giving TED Talks." A dry chuckle escaped his lips. "I used to think I was important, that what I built mattered." He paused, eyes drifting toward the fireplace. "But after Anna died, I couldn't walk into that office without feeling like a fraud." "You left because of her," Olivia said quietly. Noah nodded. "They said it was a routine surgery. An easy one. She even laughed when I dropped her off that morning." His voice cracked slightly. "I signed the admission papers. I left her there. And when they called me hours later, it wasn't to say she was in recovery." "I'm so sorry," Olivia said. He turned to her, eyes hollow but steady. "I hate hospitals, Olivia. I hate the way they smell. I hate the way they feel. I hate that I gave her to a system that couldn't bring her back." She didn't answer. There was no answer to give, only silence. And sometimes, that was enough. The next few days passed quietly, but Olivia felt the lines around her blur. She was here almost every day now. She knew where the cereal was kept. She knew where the shampoo Lily liked and which lights buzzed if left on too long. She knew Noah's routine, coffee by 7, first email by 8, pacing the hallway by 9. And yet, she didn't live here. She wasn't part of this world. One afternoon, she sat alone in her car after leaving the house. Her hands gripped the steering wheel longer than needed. Her chest felt tight, not from pain, but from the confusion that swirled inside her like fog. This wasn't her family. This wasn't her life. That night, she pulled out a pen and wrote her nurse supervisor an email. It was simple and polite, a request for a few days off, citing personal reflection. She needed space, not because something had gone wrong, but because something was starting to feel right, too right. The next morning, she arrived at Noah's door, not with a coloring book, but with an envelope. "I need a few days," she said, offering a small smile, "to think, to breathe." Noah stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." Lily came running down the stairs, arms outstretched. "Are we reading today?" Olivia crouched down, kissed the girl's forehead, and whispered, "Not today, sweetheart, but soon." As she walked away from the house, Olivia felt a strange ache, like she was leaving something behind that she hadn't quite been ready to name. Not love, not yet, but something close. Back at the hospital, everything felt off. The familiar rhythm of charting vitals, adjusting IVs, and answering code calls should have grounded Olivia. It used to. But now, the sterile lights felt colder, the hallways more echoing, her uniform tighter against her chest, like something that no longer fit. She moved through the wards with practiced grace but dulled eyes. The patients were the same, the procedures unchanged, but something inside her had shifted. It had only been 4 days since she walked away from that little white house. 4 days since she hugged Lily goodbye and handed Noah that envelope. 4 days, but it felt like an absence far longer than time could measure. Her phone buzzed during her lunch break, Lily's name flashing across the screen. A message came in through the kid-safe tablet Olivia had helped Noah set up weeks earlier. A drawing appeared. Crayon stick figures, 3 of them, one tall, one small, and one in the middle with yellow hair. Underneath, clumsy letters spelled out, "I miss you." Olivia stared at the screen, heart caught between guilt and longing. Seconds later, another message arrived, this time from Noah. "Lily hasn't been sleeping. She thinks you left because of her." No emoji, no follow-up. Olivia locked the phone and exhaled. The noise of the hospital hummed on, but inside her everything was very, very still. She didn't reply, not to Lily, not to Noah. Instead, she took a walk during her break, headphones in, playing soft lullabies, as if trying to drown her own thoughts. She sat by a fountain in the courtyard, watching leaves fall, letting the cool air bite her skin to remind her she was still here. She had promised herself she would not become another hole filler in someone's broken life. She had seen too many patients, too many families, who leaned on someone just because they were available, not because they were truly wanted. Olivia refused to be that. She would not be Anna's shadow, and yet, when she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's sleepy smile as Olivia traced constellations on her ceiling with a flashlight. She heard Noah's voice as he whispered, "Thanks for not getting lost," over a shared mug of tea. She remembered the warmth, not just of the house, but of being needed without being used. That night, she recorded a short audio message and uploaded it to Lily's tablet account. Her voice was calm, warm, steady. Tonight's story is about a brave little fox who lost her way in the woods. But she was never really alone. She never said her name, never mentioned Noah. But the story was one Lily would know was meant just for her. And somewhere, in the quiet of that white house, Noah listened too. He replayed the clip after Lily fell asleep alone in the kitchen. The lights were off. The tea had gone cold. But he sat there anyway, the tablet screen glowing, Olivia's voice like a memory that wouldn't fade. By the 5th day, Olivia stopped checking her phone so often. She tried to refocus. She told herself she needed space. But the ache didn't leave. It just settled deeper, quieter, like a violin string pulled taut but never played. On the 6th night, just past midnight, her phone rang. Not a message, not a voicemail, a call. From Noah, she answered before the second ring. "Lily's sick," he said. His voice was tight. "High fever. She's been crying for hours. She's asking for you." Olivia was already reaching for her coat. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. No hesitation, no questions. When she arrived, the porch light was on, the same red glow. The door cracked open before she even knocked. Noah stood there, eyes tired, shirt wrinkled. He didn't say anything, just stepped aside to let her in. Lily was on the couch, cheeks flushed, curls damp with sweat. She whimpered as Olivia approached, but quieted the moment Olivia took her hand. "I came," Olivia whispered. The child nodded weakly. "I knew you would." Noah watched from the doorway. He said nothing, but his shoulders dropped. The kind of release that only came when someone else finally carried the weight with you. Olivia sat on the edge of the couch all night, wiping Lily's forehead with cool cloths, murmuring stories about foxes and stars. She didn't need an invitation. She was already home. The air inside the little white house was warm, but Olivia's fingers trembled as she reached for the thermometer. Lily lay curled on the couch, her small body wrapped in a fleece blanket covered in cartoon stars. Her cheeks were flushed, her curls matted to her forehead. Olivia sat on the edge, brushing the hair back gently, murmuring soft nothings that were more prayer than comfort. In the kitchen, Noah paced. He had turned over every drawer, every cabinet. Bottles clinked, drawers slammed, and his voice, usually composed, controlled, cracked. "Where the hell is the acetaminophen?" Olivia didn't look up. "Cabinet over the fridge, upper right." Noah froze mid-step. Then, in silence, he retrieved the bottle and set it beside Olivia without a word. They worked like a team, the way they always did in those silent moments. Lily's fever had dropped slightly thanks to the cold compress and medication, but Olivia stayed. She stayed long after she could have left, long after Noah stopped pacing. When Lily finally drifted off into an uneasy sleep, Olivia exhaled. She stood, adjusting the blanket, then stepped back into the kitchen, where Noah sat slumped at the table, one hand gripping a mug of untouched tea. Olivia poured herself a glass of water. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "I didn't come back for you." Noah looked up, startled. She continued, "I came because a child was scared, because I couldn't ignore her voice. That's it." Noah nodded slowly, eyes dark with something unreadable. He didn't argue, didn't plead. "I know," he said simply. Olivia folded her arms, leaning against the counter. The silence stretched between them like the fragile bridge they had yet to cross. Then, slowly, Noah reached into the inner pocket of his coat, pulling out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table toward her. Olivia glanced down. Her brows furrowed as she read the header, "Reinstatement Application, New York State Medical Board." She blinked. "You," he met her gaze. "I never told anyone, but I was a licensed trauma surgeon before I transitioned to administration. After Anna, I walked away from it all. Board membership, consulting, everything. I didn't think I could trust myself to help another patient. Not after—" His voice trailed off, but Olivia didn't press. She understood. Sometimes silence held more truth than words. He tapped the paper. "But then you came. You showed up when no one else would. You didn't even hesitate." She looked at the form again. Her heart tightened. "You're applying to return?" He gave a short nod. "Not as CEO, not in a boardroom, just to help again. Maybe part-time, maybe a clinic. Something real." Olivia stared at him, and in that moment, something inside her softened. Not out of sympathy, but recognition. This wasn't a man looking to be saved. This was a man quietly choosing to rise again. She placed a hand on the form, gently smoothing the edges. "You don't need me here for that." "No," he said, "but I wouldn't have remembered I could still be that man. If you hadn't come—" She looked away, biting her lip. Her throat felt tight. Then he stood, walking toward her, not too close, but close enough for her to see the tired hope in his eyes. "If there's ever a day you feel ready," he said, his voice lower now, almost fragile, "don't just come for Lily." She met his gaze. "Come for yourself. Come for what this could be, if you let it." Olivia didn't answer, not right away. Instead, she walked past him, back to the couch, crouching beside Lily once more. She stroked the little girl's hand, saw it twitch as Lily stirred and leaned into the touch even in sleep. She closed her eyes. Maybe she had come for the child, but maybe, just maybe, there was a part of her that had missed the feeling of being seen, not as a caregiver or savior, but as someone worth staying for. That night, Olivia stayed until the sky turned lavender and the city lights dimmed. She left quietly before dawn. But this time her steps were not those of someone running away. They were the steps of someone who might come back. 1 year later, the neighborhood looked different to Olivia. Not because the streets had changed, but because she had. Gone were the late-night ER shifts, the endless paperwork, and the bleached hallways that once consumed her days and nights. She had traded the sterile scent of antiseptic for the crisp air of early mornings and the laughter of children. Her apartment was now a small one-bedroom above a bakery, just 3 blocks from Noah's home. It was modest, with mismatched furniture and sun-faded curtains, but it was hers. For the first time in years, Olivia chose where to be, and she chose here. She no longer wore scrubs. Instead, every morning she opened the doors to a converted garage that served as her community first aid classroom. Inside were rows of child-sized mannequins, posters on Heimlich techniques, shelves of bandages and plastic stethoscopes, and a whiteboard with daily lesson topics. Lily was always the first to arrive. Now 5, the little girl entered each class with her backpack bouncing and her curls tied up in a messy ponytail. She would march up to Olivia, flash her a toothy grin, and announce, "I checked Daddy's blood pressure this morning. He's fine." Olivia would pretend to gasp in awe. "Well, Nurse Lily, you're promoted to junior medic immediately." Every child in the class adored her, but none more than Lily, who insisted on calling Olivia Coach Liv. Noah always said that was her way of keeping Olivia hers, unique, apart from everyone else. Noah himself had begun volunteering twice a week, helping fix the classroom plumbing and building extra shelves. He brought snacks, always the organic kind that Olivia secretly found bland but appreciated nonetheless. He never pushed, never asked, but he stayed. One Saturday morning, Olivia found a note on the bulletin board. It was hand-drawn with purple crayon. "Today is the day. Lily." She smiled, puzzled. The answer came that evening. The local community center was hosting its annual awards night. Olivia had been nominated by several residents for her public health contributions, especially for her work teaching families basic emergency care. She had not planned to attend. She preferred quiet corners and behind-the-scenes efforts, but Noah gently insisted. So she went. The auditorium was crowded, warm with body heat and the buzz of neighbors reconnecting. Olivia sat in the back, hair tucked behind her ears, heart quietly pounding. Then she heard her name. She looked up just in time to see Lily, dressed in a white blouse and blue skirt, step up to the podium, the microphone nearly taller than she was. The MC whispered something to her, adjusting the mic. Then Lily cleared her throat. "My name is Lily Campbell. I'm 5. I used to get really scared at night, especially when my dad got sick. But then I met someone brave." The audience fell silent. "She came to my house because I called my mom. But she came anyway, even though she wasn't my mom." "She's not my mom." Lily paused, her small voice steady but emotional. "But she's the person I want to be like most when I grow up." There was a beat of silence, then thunderous applause. Olivia didn't move, couldn't. Her throat tightened, her hands shook, and her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. Then a warm hand found hers. She looked down. Noah stood beside her, silent, his expression soft but sure. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to, his fingers laced with hers, gently but firmly. Olivia turned back toward the stage, tears slipping down her cheek. It wasn't a grand declaration, not a proposal or a dramatic reunion, but it was something quieter, stronger. It was a feeling of being seen, of being wanted, of being home. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden stripes across the white picket fence that framed their quiet backyard. A gentle spring breeze whispered through the leaves of the maple tree, and the scent of fresh cookies drifted from the open kitchen window. The afternoon carried that rare stillness, the kind that made you pause, breathe, and feel. Olivia sat cross-legged on a checkered blanket, a cup of chamomile tea nestled between her palms. Her blonde hair glowed in the waning light. Across the grass, Lily turned cartwheels barefoot, laughter trailing behind her like music. Her blonde curls bounced with each tumble, joy unfiltered and free. Noah sat nearby on a wooden bench, a book open in his lap but unread. His gaze never left them. It had been over a year since that call at 3 a.m., a year since a trembling voice on the phone had cracked something open inside him. Since then, everything had changed. Olivia was no longer just the nurse who showed up. She was now the rhythm of their days, the stillness in their storm. "Hey!" Lily called, scampering over and flopping beside Olivia. She grabbed Noah's phone from the grass and held it to her ear, mimicking a serious voice. "Hello? Is this the nurse lady?" Then she burst into giggles. "Dad, if someone calls the wrong number again, what should I say?" Noah smiled softly. "You tell them they called exactly who they needed." Lily tilted her head, thoughtful, then nodded. "Okay, I'll say that." Olivia chuckled, brushing a stray leaf from Lily's hair. That small gesture, so simple, made something in her heart squeeze gently. She looked down at the little girl now snuggled against her side and knew she could never go back to who she was before. Noah rose from the bench and walked toward them. He knelt on the blanket, reaching into his pocket. From it, he produced a small wooden box. Smooth, simple, worn at the edges like it had been held many times, he placed it gently in Olivia's hand. "Open it," he said, voice low. She opened the lid. Inside was a silver ring, plain and elegant, no stones. Just a subtle engraving on the inside curve, answered at 3 a.m. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "I never planned to love again," Noah said, his voice steady but soft. "But that night, when you showed up without knowing who I was, tired and still willing to come, you didn't just save my life. You stepped into it, like you were always meant to be here." Olivia's eyes shimmered. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She closed the box gently, then leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. Noah exhaled slowly, as if something he had held inside for too long was finally released. Then Lily giggled and wrapped her arms around both adults. "Group hug," she squealed. "Forever, team," Olivia laughed, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Noah pulled them both closer, and for a long moment they just held each other. They didn't need a wedding or rings to prove it. They were already a family, and all it had taken was one wrong call. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops and shadows lengthened across the yard, the three of them remained there, entwined in each other's arms, in the quiet warmth of a life they had chosen. Sometimes, the people we are meant to love do not come to us by blood, but by accident, by grace, by the courage to answer when no one else would. And sometimes, the wrong number is the beginning of everything right. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey, a tale born from a single wrong call and the courage of a little girl. In a world that often feels disconnected, it is stories like this that remind us love doesn't always knock at the front door. Sometimes it rings at 3 a.m. and asks, "Can you help?" If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe once again in the quiet power of kindness and the unexpected beauty of found family, please like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, because somewhere out there, someone needs a reminder that hope can come from anywhere, even from the sound of a phone in the middle of the night. Stay with us for more stories that heal, that inspire, and that stay with you long after the last word. This is Soul-Stirring Stories, where every tale is a heartbeat.